This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Now, we all know that houses here in the UK are unbelievably expensive. Getting on the housing ladder requires a huge amount of upfront capital, and more people are having to rely on the bank of mum and dad in order to purchase their first home. The best way of demonstrating this is through the ratio of the median house price to the median gross annual earnings. Back in 2002, the ratio stood at 5.05 for England and Wales, meaning the average house cost about 5 times the average salary. This has been steadily ticking upwards, and by this year it reached 7.54. In the run-up to the general election last year, the Labour Party promised in their manifesto that they'd try to address this problem, namely by promising to build 1.5 million new homes over the course of the 5-year parliament. As they won the election with a hefty majority, they're now expected to actually deliver on this promise. So far though, things don't really appear to be going their way. So in this video, we're going to have a look at why house prices haven't dropped significantly recently, Labour's plans to get houses built, and ultimately whether these plans are working. After 14 long years out of power, how's Starmer doing at the helm of the UK? Well, it's a mixed bag. So check out our analysis of Labour's leader, their foreign policy and economic issues in our magazine Too Long. Read more by clicking the link in the description. Now, it's important to note off the bat that there is reason to think that house prices should have gone down in the last few years. Essentially, this is because interest rates have remained stubbornly high. The whole purpose of high interest rates is to make borrowing more expensive and to, therefore, slow down the rise in prices. That is to say, slow down inflation. This is why the Bank of England raised interest rates in the first place. Higher interest rates should also put downwards pressure on house prices, for 2 reasons. First, those that already have a mortgage will be hit with higher monthly costs if they're on a variable or tracker mortgage. In theory, if the costs skyrocket, it will encourage certain people to sell and downgrade in order to save on the increased cost. Secondly, though, the increased cost of mortgages should also discourage people from buying a property for the first time. In theory then, with fewer people buying, we should have seen something of a decline in house prices since 2022. However, this just hasn't happened. Average house prices did dip in price between June 2023 and April 2024. But aside from this, average house prices have continued to rise and are currently the highest they've ever been. So, why is this the case? Well, essentially, there are other factors that are influencing the housing crisis much more than interest rates. Firstly, the UK just doesn't have that many variable mortgages. Many more of them are fixed rate, so the increase in interest rates don't pass through as much as in countries like, say, Finland. Secondly, the lack of available housing puts an effective floor on prices, with Halifax explaining earlier this year that the fundamental issue in the housing market remains the lack of supply. Fundamentally, this is just the crux of the issue, and irrespective of what happens with interest rates, without actually building more houses, it's naive to think that housing will become any more affordable. It seems then that perhaps the government is right that the best way to bring an end to the housing crisis is just to build more houses. So, how's it going? Well, at the end of 2024, the government made changes to the National Planning and Policy Framework, or NPPF, which aimed at making it easier for developers to build more houses. Among the changes were the reintroduction of mandatory housing targets and creation of a new grey belt designation that would allow, in certain circumstances, houses to be built on land previously in the green belt. Labour were hoping that this would encourage house building and contribute to the 1.5 million houses target being met. However, in the spring statement, the Office for Budget Responsibility, or OBR, stated that between 2025-26 to 2029-30, 1.3 million houses would be added to the UK's housing stock. On the whole, this sounds pretty good, with it being within touching distance of the target, according to Chancellor Rachel Reeves. However, when you look into the data, the figures get a bit more shaky. Firstly, the OBR admits that the reforms made by the NPPF last year would only add an extra 170,000 houses to the housing stock. So, essentially, many of the houses would have already been built without the government's intervention. Secondly, the 1.3 million houses that the OBR predict will be built are expected to be built in England, Wales and Scotland. Only 1 million of them are expected to be built in England alone. Now, this might sound like a small distinction, but it's worth noting that Labour promised to build 1.5 million houses in England specifically, meaning that they're currently predicted to not only miss their target by around 200,000, but 500,000. Nonetheless, the government is apparently keen to stick to this promise, with a Treasury spokesperson telling the Big Issue magazine that the 1.5 million target remains for England. If things don't change though, then it looks like the government probably will miss this target. And to make matters worse, there are additional structural reasons to think that the target will be missed. The Considerate Constructors Scheme, or CCS, has pointed out that there just aren't enough builders in the UK to hit the target. They pointed out that as of September 2024, there were almost 100,000 fewer construction workers than in the past 5 years. There are effectively two main reasons for this. Firstly, the pandemic encouraged a number of older construction workers to retire, leading to something of a brain drain in the sector. Secondly, Brexit has meant that a number of European builders have been unable to return to the UK due to stricter visa requirements. Over the next 10 years, it's predicted that a third of the construction workforce over 50 years old will retire. In turn, this means that the country needs around 244,000 qualified apprentices by 2032 just to plug the gap, something that analysts are sceptical about. Ultimately, construction jobs just aren't that attractive to the younger generation, being viewed as low-skilled and physically demanding. Discussing this further, the CCS chair claimed that while the ambition to build 300,000 houses a year, a figure not seen since the 1970s, is welcomed, pushing ahead with these plans without addressing the recruitment crisis is not only short-sighted, but also dangerous when builders are already under immense pressure. While Rachel Reeves did announce £625 million in the budget to train 60,000 new construction workers, the Federation of Master Builders claims that this isn't even nearly enough, and the country will need 250,000 more construction workers by 2028. Clearly then, the government not only has to create the conditions to encourage building, but also create the conditions to encourage a new generation of construction workers. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you. Luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares this same commitment. Their thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and ultimately become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra, then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this though is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, or you can click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.